Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where love has silently disappeared, not in a dramatic collapse of society or a visible catastrophe, but as a subtle neurological shutdown in which the emotional circuitry that once made connection meaningful simply ceases to activate, leaving behind routines, habits, and relationships that look intact on the surface, yet feel internally hollow in ways you cannot immediately articulate. Couples would still wake up beside one another, continue sharing mortgages, responsibilities, and conversations, but the invisible neurochemical reinforcement that once made proximity feel comforting would no longer trigger, because the ventral tegmental area of the brain, the region identified in Helen Fisher's 2005 fMRI studies as central to romantic attachment, would no longer surge with dopamine when one partner enters the room. And without dopamine's motivational pull, attention and desire gradually detach from the person who once felt uniquely significant. Oxytocin, the hormone widely studied for its role in bonding and trust, would no longer rise during physical closeness or eye contact, meaning the subtle reduction of amygdala activity that normally lowers fear and increases emotional safety would fail to occur. And without that biological reassurance, vulnerability would feel unnecessary rather than natural. Even the obsessive early stage of romance, linked to serotonin fluctuations and heightened neural focus, would vanish, eliminating not only the intensity of infatuation, but also the neurological prioritization that pushes two individuals to invest deeply in one another. At first glance, society might continue functioning because contracts, institutions, and social norms do not depend immediately on emotional activation. Yet beneath those structures lies a psychological ecosystem built on attachment, and attachment is not philosophical, it is biological. Decades of developmental neuroscience show that infants deprived of emotional warmth exhibit elevated cortisol levels, impaired stress regulation, and long-term attachment difficulties, indicating that love is not merely comforting, but architecturally formative for the developing brain. Without love, caregiving might persist out of obligation or social expectation, but the consistent, affectionate interaction that strengthens neural pathways responsible for empathy and emotional regulation would weaken, potentially reshaping entire generations into individuals capable of cooperation, but less capable of deep relational security. The consequences would extend beyond families into public health, because research consistently links social connection to lower rates of cardiovascular disease, improved immune response, and increased longevity. While chronic loneliness, now recognized in the United States as a significant health concern, correlates with risks comparable to smoking and severe obesity. Remove love entirely, and loneliness ceases to be a condition affecting millions. It becomes the baseline human experience. From an evolutionary perspective, pair bonding conferred survival advantages in early human societies by increasing offspring survival rates and promoting cooperative resource sharing, which suggests that love was not an emotional luxury layered onto intelligence, but a functional adaptation that enhanced group stability and long-term planning. Without it, empathy would likely diminish over time, because empathy strengthens when emotional bonds reinforce the perceived value of another person's well-being. And as empathy declines, trust within communities becomes more fragile, increasing social fragmentation, even if systems remain operational. Cultural output would inevitably shift as well, since music, literature, cinema, and art have historically drawn energy from longing, devotion, heartbreak, and sacrifice, And without those emotional drivers, creativity might persist technically, but lose the depth that resonates across generations. Ambition itself could subtly transform, because countless individuals endure hardship, not purely for self-advancement, but to protect, impress, or provide for someone they love, meaning that remove love, and the motivational architecture supporting long-term sacrifice begins to thin. A loveless humanity might become more efficient, perhaps less volatile, possibly even less distracted by jealousy or emotional conflict. Yet it would also risk becoming psychologically flatter, because love introduces stakes into human experience. It makes another life matter enough to influence your own decisions profoundly. The brain would continue firing. The heart would continue pumping blood. Economies would operate and technology would advance. But meaning, an emergent property often strengthened through emotional attachment, would become harder to anchor, because love does something uniquely powerful. It converts vulnerability into connection, transforms biological survival into shared purpose, and persuades individuals to value someone else's existence as deeply as their own. In a modern American context, where surveys increasingly report rising isolation despite unprecedented digital connectivity, the gradual thinning of emotional depth already raises concerns about how technological mediation affects intimacy and bonding. And if love were removed entirely, rather than merely strained, the psychological cooling would not arrive with dramatic collapse, but with quiet normalization of detachment. Society would not explode, it would flatten. Interactions would remain polite but less profound, relationships stable but less transformative, communities structured but less cohesive. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is not that humanity would immediately fail without love, but that it might continue, functioning, productive, outwardly stable, while internally deprived of the force that historically inspired sacrifice, art, loyalty, and collective resilience. So, when you feel your pulse quicken before seeing someone important to you, or when you choose forgiveness over pride in a difficult moment, understand that this is not sentimental weakness, but the activation of neural systems refined across millions of years to ensure that connection remains central to human survival. The real danger, then, is not imagining a world where humans cannot feel love. The real danger is gradually living in one where we feel it less, value it less, or mistake efficiency for fulfillment. Because without love, the world would still function, but it would not feel fully human. And the fact that you can feel it right now, strong, irrational, inconvenient, powerful, may be the most scientifically remarkable evidence that humanity is still alive in the ways that matter most.